And I'd like to congratulate the organizing department for this great initiative. They've really done a very great job. And we are indeed proud that, in spite of its remote, backward location, in spite of the ongoing pandemic, and in spite of being devastated by the super cyclone Amphan, Raidighi College and its stakeholders have continued such great academic endeavors throughout the year with constant support from our respected principal sir and our respected GB members. Today, on the final day, the theme is Islam in South Asia, and we are very fortunate, very honored to have with us today our renowned speakers, Dr. Rizvi of Presidency University, Kolkata, and Dr. Saikia of Arizona State University, USA. I welcome them both. And without further delay, I think we should get on with the main program. Let's embark on today's academic journey. Once again, thank you all for being here, for being with us throughout the series. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vishwas, for your valuable and well thought welcome address. Now, I would like to request Professor Shanot Kumar Purkayat, Academic Council Secretary and Assistant Professor in the Department of Geography, to deliver his to say a few words regarding these academic activities during this pandemic situation. Now, I would like to request Professor Purkayat to speak out a few words on this final day of our webinar series.
Thank you, Professor Shah, and good evening, everybody. The distinguished speakers, Dr. Muhammad Sajjad Alam Rizvi, Sir, from Presidency University, Kolkata, and Dr. Yasmin Saikia from Arizona State University, USA, and all other participants from the eminent institutes from my country and abroad, all are welcome to our 5th international webinar on Islam in South Asia under the ongoing webinar series organized by the Department of History and Raidighi College. This is our final day of webinar series. At the very beginning, I am very much happy to be present here and thankful to the convener and organizing secretary and the entire team for organizing such webinar series on contemporary topics. On behalf of the Academic Council, I would like to be thankful to our principal sir and IQAC for their continuous inspiration to adopt this type of academic endeavor of our college. Today's topic of discussion is very much useful to this time: Islam in South Asia. Actually, I think the concept of religion may be established in respect of space and time. Which religion will play a dominating role to change the culture of which place and in which period? I think it depends on the philosophical and psychological framework of that particular religion. Eventually, I have had the chance to interact with the Islam and its follower and its culture through the teaching learning process in my childhood days, and I also have taught in a madrasa at the very beginning of my professional career. There I found Islam in different way. Once I knew that Islam stands for I shall love all mankind, but this mission and vision is not properly maintained in South Asia. Today's topic of discussion, as it is discussed for and our teachers also to know the output, and it will be helpful to show the way out for the new generation or future generation. I am very much thankful also to the organizing team, to the college and the Department of History for organizing such type of webinar, and our speakers for their continuous spontaneous response to our college, and I hope that they will, if we will call in future for this type of academic endeavor. Thank you to all. Viduda.
Thank you very much, Professor Shanut Kumar Purkayat, for your inspiring words on this occasion. Now, without wasting any time, let us have the technical session. I would like to request Dr. Ishita Shamasdar, Assistant Professor from the Department of Zoology, Raidighi College, to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Ishita Shamasdar. Ishita? Ishita, could you listen to me? Ishita? Ishita? Could you listen to me? Probably she is having some technical problem. Let us wait. Ishita, could you listen to me? Ishita?
Ishita is on, but
Yes, she is on, but
She is on.
somehow she is facing a little bit of difficulty.
Yeah, he resigned.
Ishita, could you listen? Unmute yourself.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes. As I have already announced, you are to introduce our first speaker today.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Dr. Sajjad Alam Rijvi completed his graduation, master's and MPhil from Jamia Millia Islamia University, New Delhi, and he did his PhD from Freie University, Berlin, Germany in the year 2012. Dr. Rijvi's areas of research interest are medieval Indian history, social and intellectual history of Islam and Muslims, history of Sufism, history of Muslim philosophy, history of emotions, and conceptual history. Dr. Rijvi published several research papers in reputed journals. Dr. Rijvi also wrote many book chapters in peer-reviewed books. One of the remarkable work of Dr. Rijvi is the Urdu articles he wrote in edited volumes. Presently, Dr. Rijvi working as an assistant professor in the Department of History, Presidency University since 2013. His teaching mainly focused on medieval and early modern Indian history, Mughal, Ottoman, and Safavid empires, intellectual history of Islam and Muslim in South Asia, and Sufism in South Asia. Over to Professor Shah.
Thank you, Dr. Ishita Shamasdar, for introducing our first speaker today. Now, we are eagerly waiting to listen from Dr. Muhammad Sajjad Alam Rizvi of Presidency College.
So thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the principals, the head of the department, and faculty members of Raidighi College for giving me this opportunity to discuss my views on Islam in South Asia by analyzing the historiographical trends in the study of Islam and Muslim societies in South Asia. I am very much indebted to them for the invitation to me to talk in this webinar. So the topic of my talk today is Islam in South Asia, analyzing the historiographical trends. So in this presentation, I will explore the various approaches to the study of Islam in South Asia by focusing on some of the recent scholarly works on this theme. I will analyze the various historiographical trends and will engage with the analytical categories for a better understanding of the construction and reconstruction of the history of Islam in South Asia. So, to begin with, I would like to begin with the presidential address of Professor Barbara Metcalf, in which she has titled her article as Too Little and Too Much, Reflection on Muslims in the History of India. So in that presidential address, she described two approaches to the study of Islam and Muslim in the history of India, wherein she talks about that there is too little as well as too much about Islam in South Asia. By too little, she means that the issue of too little is one which perhaps everyone in this room, in her presidential address, identifies. Asian topic in general are in fact not given the attentions we feel it's their due. But she also says that too little can have a second, although related interpretation. Too often, history of Muslim is reduced to Islam in the sense of taken for granted assumptions in which words like monolithic, militaristic, simple, fanatic, egalitarian resound. This textually based, narrowly defined Islam is too little to decide the complex and varied practices and loyalties of actual Muslims. Yet, Islam is made into the single most important causal variable for whatever Muslims do. Too little in these interpretations, according to Professor Metcalf, becomes too much. So far as two approaches are concerned, so Professor Metcalf discusses about the colonial as well as the nationalist narrative of Indian history, in which religion becomes one of the major markers of the identities of the communities that live in South Asia. So therein, Islam in that context becomes the textually interpreted Islam, textual-based, narrowly defined Islam, so which many scholars have appropriated to describe Islam and Muslim society. The context, of course, the deviance from this textual-based and narrowly defined Islam is sometimes described as heterodox. So we have these two dichotomies between the orthodox Islam and the heterodox Islam. So if we analyze the major works that were written by nationalist historians to study Islam and Muslim societies in South Asian context, so these two dominant analytical categories, orthodox and the heterodox, define the boundaries of the communities that they were studying. However, Professor Metcalf also says that there is a second scholarly approach which seeks precisely to offer new approaches to the medieval and early modern period, implicitly offering an alternative to religion or Islam as the preeminent explanatory variable in such areas as policy, social allegiance, and creative expressions. The use of Islam, she says, I have called too little and too much. So in that context, in the second approach, what Professor Metcalf says that there is a need to differentiate between religion and politics in Islam. So she said that so far as the correlations between politics and religion Islam is concerned, particularly in the South Asian context, the dominant attitudes towards these two among Muslims is indifference. So in most Muslim rule polities, according to Metcalf, throughout most of history, the nature of ritual practice codes of law, spiritual orientations, or whatever has been irrelevant to the state, the religious leadership has lent legitimacy to those polities that maintain a framework of institutions within which Muslim can lead their religious life. They expect patronage to mosques, schools, and shrine, but not control of what goes on in the field of politics. But non-Muslim populations expect patronage to their institutions too, as well in a Muslim rule state. So that is why, according to Professor Metcalf, we should also focus on the relation or correlations between politics and religion in the history of Islam, particularly in the context of South Asia. So therein she says that in the field of politics, it was loyalty, not a distinctive Islamic ideology, that held the state together. Under the Mughals, a Hindu Rajput who was loyal was praised. A Muslim who was disloyal was subject to jihad. So she says that these issues signal the need for precisions in calling anything Islamic. We need always to ask what is meant when the term is deployed or used. A second thicket, according to Metcalf, in the pre-colonial history is the social identity, the deep and tracks carved through it by the categories of Hindus and Muslims. So another major themes in the second approach of Islam is in the second approach to the study of Islam, which tries to take us away from the dominant narrative or colonial or nationalist narrative or interpretations of Islam in South Asia, is that they ask to focus on the formations of different social groups in different periods of South Asian history. So this focus on the social identity and the formations of social groups in the South Asian context acquires a greater significance in the context of studying Islam in the South Asian history. Okay. So the third one, which she has focused, is the so-called cultural syncretism. So syncretism, a term used to describe religious styles and art, for example. The term implies the categories of Hindu and Muslims are fixed, a notion already argued as problematic, and that bits of both in some sense mix. It encourages what one might call the vertical fallacy, that is possible to make list, even contrasting list of what is Hindu in one column and Muslim in another. It also tends to call Hindu or Muslim elements in the culture that may be neither or both. And thereafter, she problematizes the analytical category of syncretism in studying Islam in the South Asian context. But despite that, there are various scholars who also try to use that category of syncretism to study the Muslim society in the South Indian context. But in all these descriptions, what we see is that on the one hand, there is a doctrinal Islam based on text, which is narrowly defined, or which earlier in the nationalist narrative was described also as orthodox or interpretations of Islam. Along with that, we have another analytical category of heterodox or superstitious category of Islam, which cannot be incorporated into that religiously defined or textually defined Islamic category. So that is why there are various issues in describing these traditions or these approaches to the study of Islam. So what I try to discuss here in this presentation is how to reconcile the historiographical view and opinions of the actor as found in the sources. To answer these questions, I will briefly discuss some of the dominant historiographical trends in the history of South Asian Muslims. The studies on South Asian Islam have traced an evolutionary trajectory of reform, which started Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi, the founder of the Sufi order in the 17th century, was spearheaded by Shah Waliullah in the 18th century, popularized by the Tariqa-e-Muhammadiyya of his grandson Shah Muhammad Ismail in the early decades of the 19th century, and culminated in the creations of distinct Muslim identity that led to the partition of the country. So this is the dominant narrative which revolves around the categories of revival and reform. Although some scholars have programmatized this uniform linear trajectory, studies on South Asian Islam and Muslim continue to support this view. This historiographical trend is linked to the larger body of studies on South Asian Islam and Muslims, which have mainly focused on the analytical categories of reform and revival along the binaries between structuralist, legalist, exclusivist Islam on the one hand, and superstitious, popular, or inclusivist Islam on the other. The persistence of such notion is due to the historiographical trends that have been shaped by various academic approaches and political consideration. The conventional historiography of South Asia identifies as part of the colonial practice imagine India inhabited by two religiously defined communities. The Hindus were imagined as original inhabitants and the Muslims by the British as foreign rulers who arrived as successful conquerors. This trends influenced the nationalist narrative, which revolved around the self-conscious communities of Hindus and Muslims and focus on an essential India composed of two groups. In the discussions of pre-colonial period, the term cultural syncretism is used to imply that not only the categories Hindus and Muslims are fixed, but also the Muslims were divided into the Orthodox and heterodox who had a syncretistic attitudes towards local customs and practices, characterized and identified with folk Islam. The heterodox Muslims were described as nominal Muslims and were supposed to have mediationist tendencies that transcended the high of traditional Islam. Underwriting much of the historical research based on these dichotomies are approaches to Islam and Muslim to the studies of Islam and Muslim that emerged in the 1970s and 1980s. The sociologist Ernst Gellner and the scholars of Islam Montgomery Ward had respectively written of high Islam or traditional Islam as scripturalist, legalist, and exclusivist, and defined folk Islam as superstitious, hierarchical, and mediationist, or Islam that also emphasized the role of mediator between human being and the divine. Clifford Geertz used the term scriptural Islam and nominal Muslims in addressing the social spaces in which doctrinal Islam is active. Such approaches serve as a dominant paradigm in the study of Islam and Muslim across various geographical settings. A cursory survey of the history of South Asia reveals that the core of such positions, which were articulated in the context of the Arab land, constitute the dominant paradigm in the historical assessment of South Asian Muslims in India. In the 1970s and 1980s, the question of plurality of religious traditions in Islam came to dominate the intellectual debate in the light of sociological and anthropological studies of South Asian Muslims. Imtiaz Ahmad argued that the study of South Asian Islam and Muslim communities by historians, Islamicists, and Orientalists, due to disciplinary bias, had occupied itself with studying textual sources and regarded Islam as a closed system of beliefs and practices, and Muslim as a monolithic community which exhibited a remarkable uniformity of outlook and shared a considerable amount of religious and doctrinal values. According to Ahmad, Such a concept of Islam overemphasizes specific Muslim groups and types which adhere to the scriptural Islam and to the exclusion of a number of other local Muslim traditions. Ahmad, in the introduction of an edited volume, maintains that the same view and explains that the value of descriptive categories of syncretism and orthodoxy appear much more contested or problematic. Both forms of Islam, the formal, textual, and pragmatic, local, coexist in a state of tension. The elite continually contest the local tradition of Islam. People acknowledge the general concept dictated by the ulama, but they choose to live according to more particularistic notions of Islam which relate to their everyday experiences. Francis Robinson, in his response to Ahmad, argued that Islam offers a pattern of perfections for men to follow in everyday aspects of human activity as prescribed in this scriptures and gathered together in the form of Sharia. Robinson asserted that permanent state of equilibrium between scriptural faith and customary practice is fundamentally unhistorical, and that is bound to be a movement one way or the other between visions of perfect Muslim life and those ordinary Muslims lead. Some of the studies focusing on the various movements and groups among Muslims in the 18th century have also followed these categories, while some others have called for paying closer attention to different orientations of Muslim life in South Asian Islam, as they reveal different notions of reform and revival held by the actors. Shail Mayaram, drawing on the concept of hybridization discussed by Homi Bhabha, locates her analysis within the concept of liminality, as originally applied to the study of rituals. She shows that categorizing the Muslims in terms of categorical or exclusive identities is a problematic proposition. But as Margaret Pernow says, the notion of liminality to describe the groups in the gray area between religious communities is unable to solve the problem, because she says it had to draw on pure forms to localize the space in between. Because if you think of a syncretic Islamic tradition, and then we claim that the two religious traditions, they come together. So for their coming together, we at least will have two different traditions. But if we also propose a limited state or phase between these two traditions, even in that context, the two traditions will remain the same, but at least there will be a movement which will be in between. So even if we come up with the analytical categories of liminality or a liminal state of religiosity among the people or among the masses, then it will draw on pure forms to localize the space in between. However, according to Veena Das, the problem with such explanation is that they agree in principles on the existence of a normative or order of Islam, including a pattern's perfection that seems to be unchanging and unchanging sense. In doing that, they have failed in evaluating the diversity and the variety of scriptural sources and the continuous process of interpretations to which they have been put over the course of centuries. Works in the 1980s and the 1990s emphasized to revise the dominant paradigm for studying the issues of construction of religious identities, communal politics, and nationalism. Such scholarship views identities as relational rather than essential and illustrates that religion was one among many factors shaping political life, but that even when speaking of religion, alone, Muslims were and remain divided into a number of sects and school of thoughts that render the idea of a uniform community problematic. Barbara Metcalf says that nations, caste, language, and above all belief are in their politicized and enumerated form contingent and recent. Metcalf further says that being Muslims matter in a wide range of ways, most network among different kinds of elite and shaping many aspects of daily life. Muslim until the 20th century had no single organization or doctrine given the affiliation that had existed around Sufi saints or lines, sectarian groups, schools, or lineage. In the last decades, some studies have diverted attentions from the categories of uniform religious identity, reform and revival, and the dichotomy between doctrinal and syncretic Islam. They have brought new perspective to the study of Islam and Muslim in South Asia and have viewed Islam as a constantly debated discursive tradition in and across various local and trans-local contexts. This is illustrated by Richard Eaton, who considered Islamic religious traditions to be a more appropriate term because it allows the incorporation of the plurality of visions and approaches to understand Islam. Within the repertoire of Islamic religious tradition, can you hear me? Because I think there was some disturbance in my network. Okay, so this is illustrated by Richard Eaton, who considered Islamic religious traditions to be a more appropriate term because it allows the incorporation of plurality of visions and approaches to understand Islam. Within the repertoire of Islamic religious tradition, when it includes such scriptural sources as the Quran, these collections, jurisprudential compendiums, historical chronicles, biographies of the Prophet, his companions, and saints, along with hymns, travel memoirs, more. As Richard Eaton has noted, that significance attached to them by their adherents or believers is not entirely due to their perceived intrinsically divine origins or sacredness, but because these sources are discursively located and thus related to the broad traditions of the Prophet. The Islamic religious tradition, including those who are are not network problems. I'm very, very sorry. So now I have rejoined. Okay, so I was discussing Richard Eaton. So as Eaton has noted that the significance attached to them by their adherents or believers is not entirely due to their perceived intrinsically divine origins or sacredness, but because these sources are discursively located and thus are related in some way to the Quran and the traditions of the Prophet. Thus, Islamic religious tradition, including those which are based on scripture, the Quran and the Hadith, are not only diverse, but are also historically constituted and hence are always subject to contestation, redefinition, and reinterpretations. So there does not exist a conceptual basis for a normative or uniform patterns of excellence and aesthetic Islamic orthodoxy. Margaret Pernow, discussing the relationship between the formation of identity and the reformist movement, says that the question of who was a Muslim and which was the correct Muslim way of life gained a new importance in the wake of the decline of the worldly powers of the Muslims. The importance of the boundaries, according to Pernow, corresponded with the attempt at homogenizing the community by favoring on the one hand the unique canonical text over the plurality of traditions, and on the other, the universal and Arabic character of Islam over the local forms which they had developed over the centuries. She, however, concludes that the hierarchization of identities is by no means stable, uniform, and unequivocal. Religion can at times subsume all other identities, but so can class consciousness, or for that matter, feminism. In her book, Pernow takes up the issue of multiple identities in greater details and proposes a polycentric model, one which does not claim to know what Islam really is and which does not accept the definition of select reformist group. Instead, it takes seriously the authority of every single actor involved to define what Islam means. Carl W. Ernst and Bruce B. Lawrence, in their study of the Chishti Sufi order, discusses the problems related to a strong golden age historiography of Sufism based on the paradigm of reform and revival. They say that within the Islamic traditions, the backward-looking concept of history has always been balanced by a strong notions of renewal. And typically, renewal is embodied in at least one outstanding religious leader in each century. Using biographical sources, they argue that these sources speaks of the masters of the later period who gave life to the examples of the Chishti masters, who were keenly aware of the constant need for the renewal of the tradition. This is not subject to rise and decline. It persists and animates and directs all who stand within the same group, oriented to a common past and seeking a common but different future. Therefore, they begin their inquiry into the Chishti Sufi order with those major periods within which the patterns of piety and practices distinctive to them emerge. They are not defined in terms of greatness and decline, but in terms of their faithfulness to Chishti values and norms. The last text is by Reza Pir Bhai. In his Reconstructing Islam in a South Asian context, Pir Bhai claims to be a new paradigm in the study of Islam in South Asia and uses the category of sobriety and intoxication, which according to him are determined by the relationship that the individual is brought between religions, reason, and intuition. As he explained that certain schools referred as sober and inclusive of philosophical, theological, mystical doctrines make a case to subordinate knowledge gained by the exercise of reason or intuition to that availed through revelation. Other schools, terms as intoxicated and inclusive of philosophical, theological, mystical doctrines, argue that reason or intuitions are equivalent to revelation as source of knowledge. The general characteristic of a sober way, according to Pir Bhai, is to allow for intellectual adaptations and cultural borrowings within the boundaries of defined religious communities, while that of the intoxicated path ranges from the outer limits of the sober path to absolute antinomianism and latitudinarianism. In this scheme, he claims that the representative of both in every centers of Muslim habitations provide the connectedness with the broader Muslim world as well as embeddedness in a locality such as India. And each legitimates hostility and hospitality towards the local complex of thought and social norms. This decision, which was initiated by the difficulties of using the dominant paradigm based on the dichotomies between doctrinal Islam and Muslim practices, does not help us, as some of the ulama whom Pir Bhai discussed to claim to have used intuition as source of knowledge for certain issues. Furthermore, he limits his analysis to the discussions of the legal issues and has not given enough space to the practices that were at the center of the communist discourse in the binary categories of syncretistic and high Islam. So in the conclusion, I would like to argue that these studies show that religious traditions have always been subject to various interpretations across time and space. This is real by focusing on the multiple identities, various practices, orientations towards sobriety and intoxication. A closer look at this perspective, however, reveals that the core of the formation is based on practices related to Sufi ideas. They still acknowledge the existence of normative doctrine against Muslim religious life is measures. These practices were privileged and admired by some groups among the Muslims of South Asia, but some criticized them as being against the teaching of Islam. The discussions of intoxication and sobriety has received only scant treatment in the scholarly works dealing with Sufism in the context of static practices to differentiate one Sufi order from the other. In this, I also argue that instead of looking at
There is a technical fault. Somehow our first speaker failed to join again. Oh, yes, he is here.
the last sentence of my presentation, that by looking at all these work on Islam in the South Asian context and the analytical categories that they were using to study Islam in South Asia. So what is that? That the doctrinal Islam is always juxtaposed vis-a-vis the folk Islams or the syncretistic Islam. But what I would like to draw scholarly attention towards this, that even in major Sufi orders, when they participate in ecstatic practices or certain local practices, or they even if they appropriated the yogic practices within the Sufi traditions or Sufi practices, they also many times refers to the Islamic traditions to justify themselves and to to bring themselves within the fold of Islam. So what I would like to argue is that even the interpretations of doctrinal Islam is problematic, it is contested, it is debated, even among those who are many times considered as proponent of doctrinal or textual Islams or legal Islam. So it is very complex, and we will have to look at how these categories were also incorporated, or in the process of interpretation, they were many times also Islamized, within the discursive traditions of the Sufi text or the legal text, because in the Sharia text also we many times have the notions of urf or adat, or local customs or customary practices, particularly the Hanafi schools of thought, and I have many times incorporated many local customs within the legal traditions of the Hanafi jurisprudence school. So the technical categories that have been used by these scholars based on the dichotomy between the local syncretistic or folk Islam and the high legalistic spiritualist Islam is problematic. This is what I argue. So I conclude my talk here, and I look forward to your comments, suggestions, and questions. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And I'm really sorry for the disturbance in the network connections, internet connectivity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Raidighi, for your enlightening words. Definitely, our viewers and the listeners will be getting benefited from your lecture. Uh, is there any question for Dr. Raidighi? I think no question at all. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Rizvi, for giving us this opportunity to listen from you. Definitely, the normal time will be giving more such opportunities to explore your ideas and your views on such enlightening topic, illuminating topic. Thank you very much once again. Now let us have our second lecture today. Our second speaker and the last speaker of this webinar series is Dr. Yasmin Shaikia, Professor of History, Arizona State University. We are thankful to her for being here to share the screen and to give us an opportunity to listen from her. So once again, I would like to request Dr. Ishita Shamazdar, Assistant Professor from the Department of Geology, to introduce our second speaker.
Am
Ishita.
I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes. Yes.
Yasmin Saikia is a professor of history and holds the distinguished Hardik Nikokos Endowed Chair in Peace Studies at Arizona State University, USA. Yasmin Saikia hails from Assam and is an alumnus of Aligarh Muslim University, where she did her undergraduate and master's degree, passing with the highest honors in both examinations that won her the university's Roll of Honor and several gold medals. Yasmin Saikia took a second master's degree and PhD in South Asian history from University of Wisconsin-Madison, USA. Yasmin Saikia has published 3 monographs, 4 edited books, and over 3 dozen peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. She is a recipient of multiple international fellowships and grants, including the prestigious National Endowment for the Humanities Collaborative Research Grant this year, 2020, Fulbright Fellowship 2009-10, Harry Frank Guggenheim Fellowship 2005-7, and the American Institute of Indian Studies Senior Fellowship 2017, American Institute of Pakistan Studies 2016, and several more throughout her academic career. Yasmin Saikia's research and teaching focuses on memory and identity in contemporary India, nation, state, gender and violence in post-colonial South Asia, Muslim history in Assam, and more recently, she has focused her research on the practice of peace in everyday life. She is continuing a decade-long multi-country research on people's peace, produced 2 edited books, and is writing the third and final book of this 3-part trilogy. She is the only South Asian scholar in the United States who simultaneously work in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Her motivating purpose is to use history for creating peace and human understanding among the divided people in South Asia. Yasmin Saikia is married to Professor Chad Haynes, who teaches at Arizona State University, and they live in Paradise Valley in Arizona, USA. Over to Professor Shah.
Once again, thank you, Ishita, for introducing our eminent speaker, second speaker and the last speaker of the webinar series. Now, for the lecture she is going to deliver today, we are eagerly waiting for her. It is a great opportunity to welcome you, ma'am, after Kamala Harris, Indian-rooted lady, has become the Vice President of the USA. So this is the second opportunity today to have you with us and to listen from you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I want to thank this committee, Jahan Ali Purkait and Ayush Shah, who had contacted me for this particular webinar. So it's a great opportunity for me to reach out to young students, colleagues, and other interested scholars and listeners in Calcutta and elsewhere, wherever you are. Good morning from Arizona. It is 6:30 in the morning here. My talk today is, and I would like to say that after my talk, if it is possible to spend 5 or 10 minutes, I would like to get your feedback or your comments or suggestion, because this is a work in progress, and your feedback would be greatly appreciated because it will help me think through some of the problems that I'm trying to develop. The talk today is called Decomposing Muslims, History and Politics of Identity in Assam. Are you an Assamese or a Muslim? Is a question I had to deal with since kindergarten. The question perplexed me as a young child, and it dumbfounds me even today. Muslim is being substituted now by the term Mughal in Assam. So a young child today might be asked, are you Ahomia or Mughal? The Mughal rule ended in 1857 when India became a colony of the British. In Assam, however, the Mughals have made a comeback, revived by the sheer will of political hatred of the Assam leaders of the Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, who have a one-point agenda of dehumanizing Muslims. To ask me or someone else to choose between being an Assamese or a Muslim, particularly for me, would be tantamount to relinquishing everything I have known, family, home, history, and values, and invent what Zygmunt Bauman calls a fraudulent self. Drawing from Muhammad Arkoon, I would argue that becoming this fraudulent self is an unthought ontological and epistemological loss that neither I nor the wider Assamese community can afford. My family's history in Assam begins with a traveler called Sheikh Azimuddin, who came from Delhi in 1604. His grandson, Sheikh Kalyan, became a Saikya in the reign of the Ahom king Jayadhar Sinha in the mid-17th century, and received a large land grant and an Ahom noblewoman, Labonya Gabhuru, in marriage. Thus, the family came into existence with a Muslim settler from Delhi and an Ahom noblewoman who came together by royal decree recorded in a copperplate inscription. My ancestors lived and died in Assam as natives. They were known as Naumati Saikya or New Land Saikya. There are millions of blended and fused Muslims like my family who for several hundred years did not wear an identity label. Today, due to the changed political attitude defined by the BJP, Muslims are otherized and tagged with labels like Goria, Moria, Dekhi, Julha, Silchoria, Gwalporeya, Mia, and many more names. These labels do not dignify but diminish the Muslims. Some among them are called Mughal invaders, others are foreigners, infiltrators, illegal Bangladeshi, and even lowly termites, in the words of Amit Shah, the current Home Minister. The government is determined to transform Muslims into strangers and, if possible, drive them out because allegedly they are a threat to the true indigenous Assamese or Hindus of Assam, so they claim. Two broad issues anchor my presentation. One, the making of Muslims into outsiders in Assam, and two, the culture of Assamese Han Miholi that I translate as blended humanity. For understanding the first issue, I focus on two communities, the Goria or the Assamese Muslims and the Mia who are reduced into illegal immigrants. Drawing from the American gender theorist Lisa Bowleg's concept of decomposing, I argue that labeling Muslims under various categories is a way of decomposing their humanity and transforming them into multiple groups of violent invaders and subterranean termites. Refusing this negative knowledge that dissects people into parts, I offer an alternative approach of a composite humanity produced in Assam through Han Miholi or blending and fusing. I argue that local Han Miholi values undermine the inhospitality of othering. I'm not privileging Han Miholi nostalgically, but historically. Following the British sociologist Keith Tester's call for action for changing the current human condition, I suggest that Han Miholi can produce positive actions for the Assamese to experience peaceful living in the present and chart the way forward for the future. My presentation is divided into three subsections. I begin in the present, documenting the rise of the BJP's Hindutva politics of terror directed against the Muslims in Assam. In the next section, I trace the history of the two groups, Goria and Mia, and end the presentation by returning to Han Miholi's past for the future. BJP's Hindutva in Assam, this section is called. The Muslim question in Assam is intimately connected to a category called the Assamese, which to date remains undefined. Thus, it becomes the site of contestation and conflict among both the public and political groups. The most vocal and dominant among these seeking to redefine the Assamese is the BJP, a new transplant political party in Assam that wants to make the Assamese into an exclusive Hindu group. The BJP's ideology of engineering Assam into a single house of homogeneous Hindu citizens is based on Hindutva, developed by the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh or the RSS, which draws inspiration from the Nazi brown shirt movement. The Northeast region, particularly Assam, is the current area of focus of the BJP because the Muslims constitute more than 12 million, which is over 1/3 of the 33 million people. Assam has a mixed population of Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Sikh, and many other non-denominational religious communities who inhabit the two valleys, Brahmaputra and Barak, and the surrounding hills. The people speak a variety of languages, Assamese, Bangla, Boro, and regional dialects. Historically, the variety encountered one another in wars and peaceful exchanges among the multiple local kingdoms ruled by the Ahoms, Koch, Qataris, Mughals, and so on. In 1826, the British acquired the territories of the Ahom kingdom from the Burmese through the Treaty of Yandabu and made individual treaties for occupying the other smaller kingdoms too. The region became a single backward frontier, in the British words, and the British transformed the multi-ethnic communities in their administrative parlance into, quote, uncivilized, rude Mongoloid tribes, unquote. For the sake of reorganizing the melange and creating a single governable group, in 1901, the colonials created the Assamese as a census category, but did not define who is an Assamese. The tea economy, launched by the colonials and geography of the valley, combined to create the Assamese. They were the valley-dwelling peasants, and Assam tea became a marketable brand. The colonial administrative measures of inner line separated the Assamese from the hill communities. Because the term Assamese did not enclose an ethnic group, the common feature among the people became the shared language, also called Assamese. Until recently, the Assamese speakers were a multi-ethnic, multi-religious Assamese people. The Bengalis who had arrived in Assam with the colonial administration were very similar to the Assamese, but the small differences between them became exaggerated. To abolish the Assamese language because, according to them, Assamese is a corrupt form of Bangla, unquote. After a protracted campaign in 1873, the Assamese language was officially reinstated. The Assamese anti-Bengali sentiment developed in this colonial encounter of language rivalry and morphed with changing circumstances of geography and politics into a religious battle. In 1873, the Assam province was delimited from Bengal, but the boundaries between them were not firm and several adjustments were made over time. The moving border made the people vulnerable. In the border districts, the people found that they were sometimes included in Assam and other times they were in East Bengal. The indeterminacy of the colonial mapping phenomenon had huge negative consequences for the people on the ground. After 1947, while West Bengal and its people became part of India, East Bengal initially became East Pakistan and later Bangladesh, and the people became foreigners to the Assamese and the Indians. Inside Assam, the immigrant Bengalis, both Hindu and Muslim, became the Bidehi or foreigners, but the accusation of infiltration was heaped on the Muslims who metamorphosed into the hated category called Mias. Thus, along with language and geography, religion was weaponized to construct the other in Assam. The Assamese aggravated sense of the other is operationalized by the BJP for Muslim othering. It is not merely a political tool, it is ideological. India, they say, should be a Hindu Rashtra or country containing the territory of Akhand Bharat spanning from Afghanistan through northeast India to Myanmar. In Akhand Bharat, there will be no Muslim minority citizens. Reclaiming land from the Mia encroachers and returning it to the Hindu people is a current proposed solution in Assam. The BJP popularized a narrative of protecting Assam's land, border, and community, Mati, Bheti, Aru Jati, during the state and national elections in 2016 and 2019, respectively. The same mantra with new images going further back into history, harking to the Mughals, is now invoked for constructing all Muslims as outsiders in Assam. This is layered on top of the propaganda against the Mias. The BJP's multi-pronged epistemological attack reduces all Muslims into invasive, aggressive, and violent outsiders. To address the Muslim menace, after winning the general elections in 2019, the BJP government decided to change the demography of Assam and India. They passed the Citizenship Amendment Act, or CA. Before CA, a statewide National Register of Citizens, or NRC, was prepared and completed in July 2019 to detect the illegal immigrants in Assam. However, when the NRC was released, the BJP immediately rejected it because most of the illegal immigrants were Hindu, which assures Indian citizenship to all undocumented Hindus and non-Muslims who migrate or migrated from Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. CA is a hugely unpopular solution for the Assamese. The Assamese Jatiyatavadi or sub-nationalist groups reject CA on ethnic and linguistic grounds. The progressive Assamese groups also reject CA because they do not agree with the BJP's approach of religion-based citizenship. Soon after CA became law, the Assamese took to the streets to protest. Two things changed the course of the mass activism. One, the national media became quickly disinterested in Assamese anxiety and shifted to Delhi Shaheen Bagh, where Muslim women had organized a peaceful sit-in protest against CA. By making CA a Muslim project, the media gave a religious color to the people's struggle. Two, COVID-19 broke out. A hyped-up narrative of the Muslim group Tablighi Jamaat spreading the virus in Assam after attending a meeting in Delhi became public propaganda. The government's public naming and shaming of the conference attendees from Assam emboldened the divisive forces within. People set up barricades with signs reading "No Muslim Entry" and "Corona Jihad." Anti-Muslim slogans symbolized and represented internalization of the government's rhetoric. I was in Assam when COVID broke out and was horrified to witness the politically constructed religious divisions. Assam was not the place of my childhood, but a transformed site occupied by the BJP to carry out their agenda of ruling with hatred. Assam is at a critical juncture. It must choose between its multivalent, heterogeneous local past and the homogeneous Hindu identity. The lived history of Han Miholi, tried and tested over centuries, offers an alternative way of thinking about and being with the other. To me, this local resource holds the key to the future of living in peace with one another. In the next section, I turn to the histories of the Goriyas and Miyas that produce a narrative of gradual displacement, from being included to becoming the excluded people. The process and shift raises a variety of questions about the paradox of partial views based on one's position, the forgettability of the past, and the power of post-colonial politics that have made Muslims, as Giorgio Agamben has argued in his book Homo Sacer, the disposable bodies for violating with impunity. Goriya and Miya, the history of belonging in Assam. This is the second section. In the pre-colonial period, multiple outsiders came together in the Brahmaputra Valley, creating the history of a we community, recorded in the chronicles called Burunjis, produced in the Ahom kingdom. The Burunjis mention a wide variety of groups constituting the we. They were Manipuri, Jayantiya, Naga, Dafla, Chutia, Kochari, Bongal, including Muslim and Hindu, Ahom, Brahmin, Motok, Moran, Hindus of various orientation and caste groups, and many more who were the subjects of the Ahom kings. The exchanges between the varieties of people shaped the history and culture of Han Miholi, and the interdependence among them sustained the we community. Where does the Goriya fit in the we? In the Burunjis, no community is labeled thus. There is no separate Goriya community. It is in the colonial history that we come across a community called Goriya. Edward Gade, a colonial administrator, classified the Goriyas as descendants of the Muslim invaders who came from Bengal, placing them as a community of outsiders. In Assam, post-colonial historians trained in the colonial historical methodology accepted this interpretation and proliferated it in their books, although there were many who disagreed. Using the resource of early Assamese dictionaries, the later group opined that the terms referred to the earliest Muslim settlers in the Brahmaputra Valley who married locally but remained socially aloof, or Egg Goriya. The people and the villages became known as Goriya. Naming people and places according to the characteristics is an Assamese tradition. Even kings and religious teachers were given names according to their attributes, such as Khura Raja, lame king, Bhogania Raja, dethroned or fugitive king, Burha Raja, elderly king, Ajan Phokir, praying dervish, and so on. The Goriya group, one can surmise, are Muslims who settled in the Brahmaputra Valley in the pre-colonial period. This explanation changes the narrative of Goriyas from invaders to settlers who made Assam their home. My family's history is a case in point, as I had mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. The Goriya is a local Muslim community who are unique to Assam. Burunjis, family Bankhawalis, copper plate inscription, material objects, and royal artifacts recall the history of Muslim settlement in Assam. These newcomers were desirable to the Ahom kings for the military, architectural, agricultural, and other knowledges that advance and enrich the local court. Muslim masons and artisans designed, built, and decorated the Ahom palaces, Karanghor and Tolatal Ghor, the royal sports pavilion, Ronghor, temples like the Rongana of Dole, the famous stone bridge called Heel Haku, among other royal buildings. Some Muslim worked as scribes and Persian readers, rendering the service in Ahom court and the royal mint. Persian legal terms are still in use in Assam. Muslims also served as land surveyors, and their contributions are obvious in a variety of Arabic loanwords in agricultural terms. The speaker before me had spoken about Dick Eaton and how Islam had penetrated into the frontiers of Bengal, and he also mentions about Arabic words in agricultural documents in Bengal. So this is a common phenomenon. Muslims brought it there. Muslims introduced the use of cannon and gunpowder in the Ahom army. They also worked as elephant trainers, painters, musicians, embroiderers, and so on. The Ahom kings even appointed Muslims in the service of Hindu temples, and they became the Devoliya Muslims. Trusted Muslim military officers had a responsibility of putting down internal rebellions. They were appointed as commanders of units of various sizes with the titles of Bora, Saikia, and Hazarika, along with Hindu officers who had the same titles and the same duties. Muslims were appointed as the head of the civil administration, alongside Hindu officers with the title of Borua, and the highest office for a Muslim was called Nawab Deka, that to this day is held by my father's maternal line. What made the Ahom kingdom's effort at assimilation unusual and splendid was the process was interactive. It was not a one-way street requiring the Muslim settlers to adopt to the local ways. The Ahom kings and nobility, too, adopted a variety of Islamic cultural forms. Burunjis record that from the time of Pratap Sinha, which is early 17th century, the system of the Bongals, referring to those who came from the western region, became evident in agricultural and military practices. In the reign of Rudrahingha, that is in late 17th and early 18th centuries, the king and his ministers adopted the royal costume of the Mughal kings of Delhi, and his successor, Rajeswar in mid-18th century, initiated the reading of Islamic prayer in the court and included a variety of Arabic and Persian terminology in the royal lexicon. There are ample evidences in the Burunjis that record the creative interactions between the courts of Delhi, Assam, and Dhaka. I'm convinced from my extensive research of the Burunjis that the secret of the Ahom success was a uniquely creative ability to be Catholic in their cultural orientation and produce Hanmiholi subjects, as well as a royal court that exhibited the inclusions. The king and the subjects were fused in the process. The splendor of the integrative Hanmiholi memory is unforgettable in Assam even today. The process of exchange, integration, and interdependence among the variety persisted until the very end of the Ahom rule. Muslim families who served the Ahom kings for several hundred years remained unwaveringly loyal. This was expressed in concrete historical actions, such as the revolt of 1857, when the Assamese, as elsewhere in India, tried to oust the British. A relative, Sheikh Farmud Ali, and his colleague, Sheikh Bahadur Gaumbura, along with many others, conspired with Moniram Dewan to reinstate the Ahom king and drive out the colonials from Assam. The plan was discovered, Moniram Dewan was executed, and Farmud Ali, Bahadur Gaumbura, and other rebels were imprisoned in the cellular jail in the Andaman Island. These men, Muslim and Hindu, considered themselves unequivocally Assamese, Khati Ahomia, and they sacrificed their lives and property for the sake of the community. Today, the Muslims vacillate in the Hindu Assamese imagination. Two widely accepted Muslim heroes of Assam, Bagh Hazarika and Sayyid Abdul Malik, are the most recent victims. Bagh, or Tiger Hazarika, also called Ismail Siddiqui, occupies a special place in the Assamese memory as a Muslim military officer in the Ahom army who fought in the Battle of Saraighat in 1671. Although in the Burunjis this battle is not given a special status, later historians constructed it as a watershed moment for defeating the Mughals, overlooking that it was the Rajput general Ram Singh who led the army. The BJP and the supporters have created the memory of this battle as paving the way for the rise of Hindu power in Assam. Because the memory of Bagh Hazarika comes in the way of creating a neat narrative, Probin Kaur, a BJP spokesman, declared Bagh Hazarika was a fictitious character. Likewise, the fate of one of the most revered Muslim writers, Sheikh Abdul Malik, Sayyid Abdul Malik, who is widely acknowledged as a pillar of modern Assamese language and literature. Ruparani Bhuya, a college teacher, declared him a traitor who supported the Mughals in his poem, Moi Ahomia, I'm an Assamese. Probin Kaur, Rupa Rani, the noisy new propagandist Saitya Narayan Bora, who rose to prominence this past year for his tirade against love jihad and calling for banning beef for zoo animals, and many others catapulting to fame, are spreading poisonous and fabricated information of impending Muslim danger. Ultimately, the goal is for undoing the Muslims as Assamese and Hinduize Assam's history, memory, and imagination. While the Goria are slowly eclipsing in the Assamese imagination, the Chor Sapori Mias are suffering virulent dehumanizing attack. The Muslims inhabiting the Chors, river islands, and Chapori sandbanks are variously labeled No Ohomia, New Assamese, Pomua, farmers, Charua, Saur residents, Mia, and reduced to Geda, filthy, or illegal Bangladeshis. The name Chor Sapori Mias situate them within the geography of their place of residence, which I think is preferable. Etymologically, the word Chor, the word Mia, is of Urdu origin, meaning a man of social standing, a gentleman. In Assam, however, it pejoratively refers to Bengali Muslim immigrants. Today, some Mia poets and artists use the term as a self-reference for highlighting the humiliation they suffer. I'm using the term similarly in the spirit of refusal to accede to the politics of otherizing and dehumanizing the Mias. Thus, when I refer to them as Chor Sapori Mias, I do with the hope that knowledge about the othering process and everyday lives of the Mias will motivate discussion for redress and improvement towards a human future. The Chors are over 100 years old. There are over 2,000 of them, but not all are habitable. Although many Nepalis and other communities also live in the Chors, the Mia groups and the Chors have become synonymous. Chors where the Mias live are mostly underdeveloped. Few have secondary schools, healthcare centers, or business establishment. They're neglected, forgotten spaces disconnected from the mainland. Parveen Sultana, a Chor Sapori scholar, laments that Chors have become the nowhere people living in the missing villages that no one cares about. In Lakhipur and Morisakundi, two Chors located in Borpeta district in Western Assam that I visited in October 2019, as well as in many other Chors, the people are gravely concerned about their future, particularly for those left out of the NRC roll of July 2019. Almost everyone I talked to told me that their ancestors came to Assam more than 100 years before. Although the majority are included on the citizens' roll, they cannot shed off the label illegal. They fear that anti-Muslim sentiment is very high and Mias may end up in detention centers and even deported. They do not know what they will do because they have no home except Assam. This existential crisis is an extremely debilitating state and many suffer from depression. To understand the history of the exclusion, it is important to grapple with their story of settlement in Assam. The Muslim peasants who came to Assam from Mymensingh in East Bengal, present-day Bangladesh, in the early 20th century are now classified as Mias. The Mymensingh Hindu landlords owned almost all the arable land and the Muslim peasants were landless. Becoming landowners in Assam was an attractive option for these peasants. However, it was not until the partition of Bengal of 1905 to 1911 that colonial records tell us that the number of Muslims that came was very small, and tea garden laborers composed a larger group of immigrants to Assam. The Bengali immigrants settled in the islands in the western districts of Brahmaputra, close to Gwalpara, that adjoin East Bengal, cleaned the uninhabited land, brought it under cultivation, and were good neighbors to the local people. In 1924, the Colonial Commissioner of Assam, B.C. Allen, described the land thus, quote, "Near the river, the land as a rule is low and is covered with reed jungle, much of which has in recent years been taken up by hardy immigrants from Bengal, which an up-country man would consider to be quite unfit for human life," unquote. As one can imagine, the Chors are not primary property for the Assamese. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, the immigrant peasant population therefore kept growing in the Chor areas, but they also spread to new areas in central Assam, Kamrup, Dorong, and Nagaon. The line system, introduced by the colonial administration, segregated and distanced the Mias from the Assamese and hill communities. The immigrant peasants nevertheless moved beyond the demarcation because the Assamese were willing to sell them land and the corrupt revenue officials settled them in villages adjoining the Assamese. Greedy for more cash crop revenue, the colonial administration stood back but fanned the Muslim fear, warning them of land-grabbing Mohammedans who would alter their culture, language, and religion of the Brahmaputra Valley. The Hindu Mahasabha, the religious platform of the RSS, stoked tensions, claiming that there are, quote, alarming reports of forcible occupation of land in mass scale by Muslims, unquote. Organizations such as the Assam Protection Society or Assam Songrakhani Sabha, the Jatiya Mahasabha, the People's Assembly, and the Indian National Congress, INC, made it a public issue to resist this invasion of the Muslim immigrants. In 1941, when the Muslim population counted at 1,696,978 against 3,222,377 Hindus, the people in Assam were alarmed. Statistics and numbers and terms like native and outsider, which the colonials used for administrative purposes, acquired a new value for manufacturing facts for politics and enlarged the boundaries of interpretation. Measuring what the Assamese lost and what the outsiders gained enabled the politicians to create and argue that an uncomfortable immigrant-dominated history was forming and threatening the indigenous people. The laboring Mias became the embodiment of negative connotations: criminal, dirty, litigious, greedy, thieving, smelly, and so on. The rhetoric of indigeneity and outsiderness that emerged in consequence produced cleavages among the Hindus and Muslims rife for violence. In these circumstances, one could hardly expect that those viewed as outsiders would embrace Assamese culture and language. Yet, the Chorsapuri Mias, in their earnestness to assimilate, did that. Unlike the Bengali Hindu immigrants, the immigrant Muslims adopted Assamese as their mother tongue, paving the way for Assamese to become Assam's official language. The language and the Assamese community benefited, but the Mia benefactors did not. Speaking Assamese could not wash off the stigma of being immigrants. Driving out the immigrants became official policy after India's independence in 1947. In post-independent Assam, language agitation directed against Bangla initially targeted the Hindu Bengalis who refused to adopt the Assamese language. In the late 1970s, the Assamese launched a public agitation to drive all outsiders out of Assam. Although the Ahom Andolan started as an economic and cultural struggle, very quickly it went through a sea change after the RSS entered the fray and the term Bangladeshi gained currency. Mias were identified as illegal foreigners. On February 18, 1983, the alleged Mia village of Neli near Nagaon was torched by the Hindu and tribal neighbors, killing thousands of poor peasants and their families. The Neli residents could not understand the logic of the violence. They were born as natives. They had supported the Ahom Andolan, and yet the mob killed them for being Bangladeshi. The agitation enabled the Assamese Hindus to assume ownership of Assam. They placated the rival Boro Plains tribe community by giving them an autonomous territory. The combined forces of the Assamese and Boros have since then periodically directed their anger against the Mias. Academics, government officials, and journalists added to the woes of the Mias by producing statistics and narratives to prove that the Bangladeshi immigrants were overwhelming the local people. The yarn of the story of Mia invasion lengthened even after the Assam Accord was signed between the government in Delhi and the student leaders of the All Assam Student Union, or ASU, in 1985. Today, people freely talk about the Mias as infiltrators. Pushed to the extreme margins, the Mias have lost trust of the Goria Muslim politicians who they think have failed and used them as vote banks since independence. Both Hindus and Mias blamed Sir Muhammad Sadullah, a Goria politician who served as the premier of Assam intermittently between 1937 and 1947, for creating the Mia problem. As well, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, who was elected from the Borpeta constituency in 1967 and later became the President of India, Anwar Taimur, the short-lived chief minister during the period of the Assam Andolan, and many other prominent Goria Muslims are blamed for using the Mias for the political ambitions. The Mias I spoke to confined it that nowadays they vote for the BJP during elections because the BJP controls the reins of power, although they prefer the Muslim politicians of the Assam United Democratic Front, AUDF, led by the Islamist leader Badruddin Ajmal, a perfumer and a member of the Jamaat-e-Ulama-e-Hind of Deobandi orientation. However, some Mias were astute enough to understand that AUDF makes them even more vulnerable by communalizing politics, galvanizing the Hindu majority and tribal groups' support for the BJP. Another profound development that has pushed the Muslims of Assam to the brink is Ka, as I had discussed earlier. Beyond the juridical engineering of citizenship, transforming Muslims en masse into outsiders is taking shape in a new history-writing project that emphasizes the Muslims and Hindus are two opposing groups, indigenous and outsiders. There is no we in this story. Added to this, the government is using a colonial tool of land reallocation. According to the new plan, Muslim lands can be designated encroacher property, confiscated and returned to the local people, or acquired by the government for other purposes. The motive is to narrow the circles of inclusion and expand the boundaries of exclusion. The poor landless Muslims, Mias or Gorias, are the homo sacer marked out for violence with impunity. So now I enter to the final section called Hanmiholi's Past in the Future. A nightmare is unfolding for the Muslims in Assam. The BJP leaders are encouraging the Assamese Hindus to denounce the Muslims, the Mughals, i.e. the Muslims, give up the local Assamese ways of Hanmiholi and refit themselves with the Indian Hindu culture by adopting public religiosity, mimic an urban lifestyle by shopping in malls for brand name luxury goods, and clamor for the good life stuffed with material things, which the BJP presents as Assam's development. For becoming a purer Hindu community, the Assamese Hindus must hate the Muslims. This is the bottom line. Drawn into the cauldron of religious, political, and economic passions, the Assamese are confused. Constituting nearly 30% of the population, the caste Hindu Assamese who dominate Assam's politics have a divided approach toward the BJP. Generally, the Assamese like to talk about the Hanmiholi culture. They tend to support local or regional parties and have been uncomfortable with Delhi, be it Congress or BJP's control of Assam. Winning the Assamese Hindus is the BJP's project, but will they succeed? The history memory of Hanmiholi, although it has dimmed with the BJP's onslaught, it continues to survive, particularly in upper or eastern Assam. Local historians like Probin Sharma, a Brahmin, fearlessly speaks about Assam's composite culture. Organizations like the Jotha Moncha, Assam Jatiyatwad Pariষদ, Anchalikatwad Suraksha Moncha, the United Regional Political Party, are some local associations that are resisting the BJP's Hindutva project in Assam, while the activist leader Akhil Gogoi and his followers continue to resist the implementation of CA. They have been jailed since December 2019. The Assamese poet singer Bhupen Hazarika's music continues to inspire the youth to hold steadfast to the spirit of Hanmiholi Assamia. The Assamese know that prioritizing the local over the national, fusion over purity, in which contemplation combines with action, are necessary for their survival. Accepting the reality of history as a beginning of a different way of being in Assam, now and the future, is very important to them. A concrete example of this awareness is a demand that the government must accept the NRC of 1951 as a document for establishing indigeneity and defining Assamese, which will be inclusive of the variety, as political scientist Manoj Nath explained to me. The media too is waking up and exposing the BJP's devious engineering of history, culture, and community. Beyond the politics of refusal of the BJP's agenda, there is another way to think of inclusion for reviving Hanmiholi. The Tea tribe community that I mentioned earlier provides a good model for this. Like the Chor Sapori Mias, the tea laborers migrated to Assam during the colonial period. In the colonial tea gardens, they became coolies, beasts of burden for the thriving capitalist tea industry that grew rich under backbreaking labor. As early as 1919, the tea laborers numbered, quote, over 1 million. Correspondingly, the total number of settlers from East Bengal was 300,000. There were 104,000 Nepalis and about 100,000 casual temporary visitors from a variety of places, including East Bengal, Burma, and Bihar. In 1921, the population of foreign extraction population was 1,737,000, or 28% of the total population, of which 1.3 million were tea laborers. Accepting the tea laborers as a community in Assam developed very gradually. Despite low wages, by 1920, nearly 50,000 laborers owned land outside the plantation after their work terms had expired. They became the nucleus of the Assam's tea tribe communities. While their social interaction with the Assamese was negligible, they were no longer referred by the derogatory term coolie, but became Adivasi, tea tribes, or Bagania, garden people. Even the garden bat or plantation dialect was accepted as a form of Ohmiya language. Although there is much to be achieved towards improving and empowering the tea tribes community, the social and cultural inclusion offers a model for including the descendants of other immigrant groups as Assamese in Assam. Likewise, the Nepali and Indian immigrant groups who came to Assam during the colonial period, they too have been absorbed. This is heartening. S.K. Bhuya, a respected Assamese historian, has his origin in Bihar, where from his ancestors came to Assam in 1792 as a subaltern in the British Army. Diverse Plains tribe group, including the powerful Koch and the affiliates who are Bongal in the Burunjis, are now included in Assam. The current chief minister, Sarbananda Sonowal, for example, is from the Sonowal Kachari tribe, a plain tribes community. As well, the Boro tribe has received the benefit of an autonomous council, and the Boro language is now an associate official language alongside Assamese. Including the Plains tribe as part of the larger Assamese community is prudent and essential. The decomposed Muslim communities need to become whole again as human beings in Assam. In 2005, the Sachar Committee report for India established that the Muslims were in the lowest socioeconomic ladder, lower than the Dalit communities. Although there is no specific data of Muslim condition in Assam, one can assume that the socioeconomic condition is similar to Muslims elsewhere in India, which is abysmal. For Assam to move forward, its people must advance. This understanding can help us step outside the blinkered view of politics and encourage a different way of imagining the future. Demanding assimilation and tolerating difference does not erase aversion toward the other because it does not remove the stain of otherness. Earnest inclusivity requires a different way of thinking and positive actions that move from narrow identitarian politics and expands a circle of humanistic awareness of the self. In Assam, this is a tall order in the current moment of hate of the other or Muslim. Nonetheless, it is possible if we approach it in small chunks of inclusion, which the story of the tea tribes highlights. An unshakable confidence in being Assamese is possible when one can be Assamese and simultaneously a part of the human community. This is not watered down Assamese-ness that I'm calling for, but an unclouded, easily recognizable Assamese identity that reaffirms the Hanmiholi past and takes it forward in the future with a new approach. A new Hanmiholi human community is possible, for that is the Assamese way of being in peace with the other. Thank you very much. This is what I wanted to share with you. But then I would greatly appreciate if you have some comments or some feedback that can also help me keep advancing this project.
Thank you very much, Madam,
Yes.
for your very contemporary exploration of history in India, and especially Assam. I could relate it as because I have had the experience to be there, as my ancestral house was in Assam.
Oh.
That is why I could quite relate some of the facts you have expressed. Now, as you have proposed to have some feedback from our listeners, let us wait to have it. Any question or feedback, please?
Everybody's very quiet.
Oh, yes.
You're allowed to ask questions. You should ask questions.
Is there anybody to ask question?
No, actually, this is unquestionable area of the topic. Unquestionable area and unquestionable presentation.
Why should it? No, you should question in the sense that, do you see a similar tendency in which history is being forgotten and politics have taken over in other parts of the country too?
Professor Allen is here. Professor Allen, please.
So, okay, so it was really a very interesting talk, and I enjoyed a lot. So I would like to know a little bit about the Muslim discourse, because as we see that the reformist or revivalist trends in Islam has also these kinds of self-identifications with Christian or original Islam. So in this debate on the identity of Assam,
I think there were a lot of, it was not
Noise
clear
was there.
when you asked me.
Yes, ma'am.
There are a lot of breaks. Can you speak again? Something about identity.
It's better to ask the question in chat box. That would be proper. That would be fine.
That's
Mr.
okay. No, I can hear, but I think there was the connection was bad. Can you repeat the question? The first part, you said something about revival and reform or something.
Oh, he has left.
Ayush, did you hear Professor Shah? Did you hear the question?
No, I couldn't hear some audible. It was not audible at all. So that is why I was asking him to put the question in chat box. Anyways, he has left.
Maybe his connection is bad.
Yes, it may.
But Jahan okay, yes. Go ahead. Sorry, please go ahead.
Ma'am, one thing I would like to know from you, as when the National Register was published in the 19 July, it was found the name of our former Prime Minister, former President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, and their relatives were missing from that list. What do you think? What is the politics behind this? Or is there any politics?
No, let me put it this way, that the kind of documents that were asked for reaffirming the citizenship, there was an NRC that was done in 1951. And it was the only kind that was done because that time the partition had happened in 47. And there were, as I said, the borders were not really firm at that time. So there was a communal riot that had happened in the border, and thousands and thousands of people had evacuated from that area and left for the other side, which was East Pakistan at that time. And after the Nehru-Liaquat Treaty was made in 1951, several people slowly started returning. Now, the NRC had already taken place, and so they were already left out of the first NRC of 1951. Now, the second NRC that was done, which took 6 years from 2013 to 2019, you had to prove the legacy, that you are part of Assam from through 50 with using 15 documents. Now, if your name was left out in the 1950, family's name was left out in 1951 NRC, because as I said, many people out of fear had migrated out from that border region, it was very hard to prove that these are not newcomers to Assam. But the 15 documents were quite complicated. Now, not everybody have in South Asia, means we all know people they're not a community of writers in a way. People don't sit and write everything down. They speak a lot. So it's an oral tradition. Katha is such an important part of the Indian tradition. So they don't have all these documents. Now they had to come up with these documents. They had to go apply for some of these documents. Some of them did have a lot of problems. There were spelling mistakes, all kinds of issues that resulted in some people being left out. There are family members in my own family who were not initially included because their parents had passed on and they didn't have the right documents, and their parents had gifted the land away to other members of the family, so they could not prove the legacy. But then you had to go to the district magistrate, and you had to go to the right channels and then prove that you are a legal person, and it was done. Now, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed's family does not necessarily live in Assam. There are some of his extended family members who have not been left out. His immediate family members don't live in Assam. So them being included does not even come into account, right? Or they have not probably applied, like I have not applied. I don't live in Assam. I'm an Ahomia, but I have not lived in Assam for the last 31 years. And I'm not an Indian citizen. I'm an American citizen. I have an OCI card. I have an overseas card for Indians. I can come and go, but I cannot vote. I cannot claim those kind of rights of people who live there. So yes, some people have been left out by mistake. Some people have left out because it did not apply. I don't think the initial NRC was a deliberate attempt to strike out Muslims. In fact, as I told, that there are more Muslims included rather than immigrant Hindus who came after 1971. In fact, that is the reason that the Assamese communities that are now coming together against this BJP's Ka is saying that we want 1951 to be used as our determining time, which will mean that all tea laborers, everybody who had come before 1951, before India was formed, will become in Assamese citizens, or Assamese will be incled.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your kind information.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I would like to have a question to you that then what is the political secrecy or game behind leaving a sizable number of the non-Muslim voters or non-Muslim citizens in Assam, approximately 13 lakhs or 12 lakhs, and more than 6 lakhs of the Muslims community. What is the game behind the political game behind this leaving a huge number of non-Muslim community from NRC?
I don't know if it's a political game. That's what being blamed, that Hajela, the Pratik Hajela, who was the previous commissioner for doing the NRC, that he played this game of including the Muslim Mia names and Muslim immigrant names, but he has deleted the Hindu Bengali names. I don't think that because as I said, there were 15 documents that were required to prove your residency in Assam. Now, those who did not have it could not get the names on. And some people were left out, not because it's a game, but there have been a lot of mistakes, like names. Like when I went to the Chor areas and spoke to a lot of local community people, the names of the parents are there, or the husband is there, the wife is not there. Sometimes children, 8-year, 12-year children have been left out, but the parents are in the document and they have the NRC report. So the reason perhaps that a lot of Hindu Bengalis, they are not the Hindu, they are from this, they're not actually Hindu, they are they're from Gorkha community, they're Motuas. A lot of the Motuas have been left out. And they came after 1971, or if they came in 1947, they first went to other parts of India and then came to Assam much later. So they were not part of the 1951 NRC in any case. So now what the Assamese are saying is that people who have come here and have lived here before January 1, 1951, should be included, whether they are Hindu, Muslim, Nepali, T tribe, whatever. It is a brihot, the large Ohamiya community, which is, as I am arguing, based on the culture of the place, the Han Miholi, that everybody is woven together, and this weaving is like a pattern that does not overshadow one group over another. So I don't see it as a game, but there is definitely now the current, because so many non-Muslims are not on the NRC, as you said, like 2 million or 20 lakhs have been left out of the NRC. The present, as of yesterday and day before yesterday, the discussion has been that we will do a new NRC again, and we refuse the old one, and we will implement Ka, and that means Ka is a religion-based citizen. So without even doing an NRC, anybody who is not a Muslim can become a citizen of India, which is a very, NRC is another thing and Ka is another thing, right? NRC is just a document. Ka is actually law, and law can have a very different impact on communities on the ground. So I see it as a very, rather than the game as an engineering, it is being engineered to diminish or decrease or create a sense of extreme fear in the minds of Muslims. You can probably live there, you can work there, you'll probably have all kinds of permits and things, but it's to denationalize. Maybe I think it's an engineering of another kind, and one has to be very, very concerned about it. Like in America, we have race, and race was one of the biggest problems here before the election. And now we seem to have overcome it, at least, and I hope it will be a successful overcoming. In India, they need to overcome the religious divide, because this is going to drag the country down. People can't just disappear. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let us conclude our technical session here. Once again, I am grateful to Dr. Soikia to making this to make this session to be more interesting, and it is very informative for all the scholars, and the PhD scholars in particular will be exploring different ideas from your lecture, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I would like to request Dr. Jahan Ali Purkayat, the convener of this webinar series, to deliver vote of thanks and simultaneously to brief the webinar series as we have been waiting for. Dr. Jahan Ali Purkayat.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Professor Bidut Shah. This is a really a tough time to me.
বন্ধ করো বন্ধ
Good evening. Good night. And good morning to those who are with us. According to let us know that what is happening, what has happened. However, keeping in mind, with your kind permission, I wish to send my
Dr. Purkait, you are not audible at all. Dr. Purkait, you are not audible at all. Jahan, you are not audible.
No, I am asked to give the microphone to the respected principal.
Okay.
Is I am audible?
Oh, yes.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Please say.
I am audible?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. Good evening, everybody. A very warm congratulations and my heartful respect to all of you. Today is a very, very special day of our Raidighi College. A long 1 month after our history department completed their 5 days international webinar series in collaboration with IQAC on society, economy, polity and culture, colonial and post-colonial South Asia. All associate members, those who are present in this webinar series, that is eminent and honorable speakers, registered participants, that is students, research scholars, teachers, and obviously organizers, both of history department and IQAC members, and those who are supporting the technical assistance. This pandemic situation given us this opportunity to organize this type of webinar. It may be state level, national level, or international level. Various types of topic are discussed in informatively and explanatory, both uh, for the students level and well as research scholar or intellectual level. Our webinar series named Society, Economy, Polity and Culture, Colonial and Post-Colonial South Asia, and our organizer arranged and lightened only 10 ideas or plots only. These are very much relevant, but I say it would be discussed 20 times more. Here lightened women's medical education and health care and colonial Bengal, Gandhiji and Clean India, Jallianwala Bagh, making of Gandhi, humanity in Islam, multiculturalism in Bengal, Islam, Sufism, and Pugilist culture in South Asia, exploring the links between Bengal and Burma, the 19th and 20th century narratives, Rohingya issues, Bangladesh, and perspectives. And today's topic is discomposing Muslims, history and politics of identity in Assam, and Islam in South Asia, analyzing the historiographical trends. I observe some topics lightened in Islam, but I say it would be discussed in Hindu, Buddhism, Christianism, etc. The history of religious refer to the written record of human religious feelings, thoughts, and ideas. The prehistory of religion involves the study of religious beliefs and existed prior to advent of written records. One can also study comparative religious chronological through the timeline of religion. We know Hinduism is the world's oldest religion according to many scholars, with roots and customs dating back more than 4,000 years, and it is not now the third largest religion behind Christianity and Islam. It is true, religion has no specific founder. It's difficult to trace its origin and history. All religion compilation of many traditions and philosophies. Some scholars say Islam is the oldest religion on earth because the Quran says so. According to the Quran, Abraham, Moses, Noah, and Jesus were all Muslims. According to history, Muhammad started speaking his new religion in 610 AD in Mecca. That's why I am waiting for the next webinar series. That's why which will be organized by the Department of History. I spent these types of discussion must be explore our thoughts, exchange our ideas. As a student of literature, I learned the relation between history and literature is history stands with happened, what happened, and literature says us what would be happening. In my poor knowledge, I feel it literature, economy, history, culture, science, politics, etc. all are under society and every discipline depends each other. Now we declare that our webinar series completed successfully. Thanks to everybody for your patience to hear my valedictory talk. Thank you again. Now I forward to Vidyut Saha for concluding the next phase webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much once again for being here as an inspirator. And always you have given the enthusiasm to all our departments to organize such type of seminars, or such type of webinars in particular situation. We have been there for a long, more than 1 month, and we have been listening so many interesting lectures from different scholars, different academicians. Before announcing this webinar to be ended, I would like to extend my cordial thanks to our principal, sir, who is also the chairman of this webinar series. Many thanks to Dr. Sudhin Sinha, organizing secretary, head of the Department of History, who has coordinated well in the department how this webinar series could be successful. Thanks to Dr. Jahan Ali Purkayat, who has been the convener of this webinar series and well who has been coordinating with the speakers who had been there for a long time to speak out their mind. Thanks to Dr. Shishi Chatterjee, coordinator of internal quality assurance cell of our college, who has supported and collaborated for this webinar series. Thanks, many thanks to Dr. Olunima Biswas, joint coordinator of this internal quality assurance cell of our college. Thanks to Professor Shanot Kumar Purkayat, academic secretary, academic council secretary, and the other members of academic council, particularly the colleagues from different departments and non-teaching staff, and special thanks to Professor Tanmay Purkayat, who has made this possible technically to make this webinar to be a successful one. Now, I would like to request Dr. Jahanali Purkayat, as a convener of this webinar series, to say a few words and declare this webinar to be an end. Jahan.
Thank you. No, now do you need to say something? Do you need to say something from me?
Not at all. Just declare that the session is over and the webinar series.
No, this is actually scheduled by principal, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being there.
Seminar is end. Thank you.
এখন 99